And is it possible if I can just read out the safety announcement for this morning, please, Mr. Chair? So before I begin, I just would like to go over the emergency response plan for the room. So if there is an emergency in council chambers, everybody is required to evacuate through the nearest safe exit. Those seated in the gallery, please take direction from our security colleagues to evacuate. Council members, please follow myself. After you do leave council chambers, please go down the stairwell and exit the building through the emergency exit and go to the muster point. Friendly reminder not to get in the elevator or walk through the city room. If there is anybody with limited mobility, please let yourself be known to myself or security at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. It is 9:32, and so we will call this meeting to order, and we will start with a land acknowledgement. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge that we meet on the traditional land of Treaty 6 territory and the Métis homeland, and acknowledge the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Nakota Sioux, as well as Métis and Inuit, and now settlers from around the world. Next, we are going to start with a roll call. Councillor Wright.
Good morning, Councillor Knack.
Good morning, Councillor Principe.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councillor Stevenson.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councillor Paquette.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councillor Tang. Good morning. Good morning. Mayor Sohi, I believe, is away on city business and doesn't actually need to be at the Council Services Committee meeting. Councillor Hamilton has sent me a note that she will be joining at a later time. She had something she was unable to move. Councillor Rutherford.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councillor Salvador.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councillor Cartmel.
Good morning.
That's the sound of somebody who lost their voice cheering, I feel like. Councillor Rice.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Councillor Jans. Councillor Jans? No? Okay. Perfect. Next, adoption of the agenda. Councillor Rutherford?
Yeah, I'm happy to move adoption of the agenda.
Thank you. That has been moved. Any questions? Oh, yeah, Councillor Wright, or Councillor Rice.
What does that mean? Must be selected. What's the approach to determine that must be selected?
So when an item's been added to the agenda and it's verbal, it can't be passed as part of the omnibus because you wouldn't know what you're passing. So we indicate that it needs to be selected for information so that you can receive the information verbally. That's all it means.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Oh, great, thank you. Any other questions? Not seeing any on the board. Please vote for the adoption of the agenda.
Councillor Stevenson is yes.
Thanks, Councillor Stevenson.
Yes, Councillor Rutherford.
Thanks, Councillor Rutherford. Councillor Jans, are you with us? We're just waiting on one more vote. We have all the votes.
Thank you. Please display the vote. That is carried. There are no minutes to approve. Protocol items, nothing official. Excellent job, Team Canada. That was awesome. I'm sure we all watched it. It was joyous. More to celebrate at a later time. But alas, today is not the day to talk about the hockey game. We have business to do, so we will move on to selections of items for debate. I will look to the board. We are selecting, yes. So those who are interested in selecting, please click on. Councillor Tang?
I think there are motions for 3.1, and I'll select 2 and 3.
3.1, 3.2, and 3.3. And that is all of them. So there are no reports that have not been selected for debate, so therefore nothing to approve beyond that. Continuing on, request to speak. I did not see any. Still always shocked when that happens. It's sad, really. I'm going to register, when I'm done, I'm going to register for Council Services Committee meetings just to speak on a regular basis. Next, requests for time specific on the agenda. There are no requests, so we will work through these in order. And therefore, we're at item 3.1, Council Services Committee requests fourth quarter 2024 updates.
Good morning, Council Services Committee. So apologies for the very nondescript title. Victoria and I were trying to figure out how to round out the last remaining outstanding item from a few years ago when Council did set up the Budget Review Task Force. They did provide their report to City Council. A friendly reminder, that report went from City Council to Council Services Committee in I think approximately September of 2023. There were 10 discrete actions that we were tasked with going away and completing. Attachment 1 provides a summary of those actions. We completed all of them. There was a slight delay in Q1 of last year with us bringing forward our final report, which is now being presented to you today. There are a few potential considerations should committee wish to advance this work. Both Victoria, myself, and Kelly Buckley from Employee Services is on the call should you have any questions. And just a friendly reminder, at the bottom of page 4, top of page 5, should Council Services Committee wish to pursue further work in this area, some options include setting up a community of practice that could be facilitated through Council Services Committee. There is always the option to change or enhance the code of conduct, and your ethics advisor is also on the call should there be any questions. And it's also possible to always ask administration to arrange for additional training for council and your offices related to topics such as Indigenous awareness, anti-racism, respect and inclusive workplace, and D&I. With that, we are happy to take any of your questions if you have any.
Fantastic, thank you very much. I will look to the board for questions. Originally, Councillor Tang selected this. Let's see if Councillor Tang would like to kick us off.
Sure, I can kick us off. On the last piece you just said about training, do you have any thoughts on mandatory versus voluntary?
So the training that's required as part of the Municipal Government Act comes in the form of orientation.
Yep.
There has been past practice of City Council passing motions requiring particular training. One of the most recent ones I can think of was to have Indigenous awareness training hosted. The city organized it with a circle of elders. And so again, this is really a question I think for Council Services to provide direction on. Whether the training is mandatory would be determined by City Council, not by administration.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's a decision that you would like to see in the motion. And I guess my thoughts on this, and I'm curious what my colleagues think. We've had some voluntary training that was offered, even let's say anti-racism during the youth internship program, and not all offices participated. And I know a lot of work goes into these training, and that is meant for us to do our work. So I guess I see value in mandatory training, because I think, especially around Indigenous awareness, for example, we require all of our employees to do that, and I think we should be held to the same standards. So I don't know if you want me to verbalize that into.
This would be, if you wanted to, yeah, so we could happily take a motion to reflect that.
Or should I leave that with you?
Well, just before, can we?
Absolutely, we
Can we
still got
fulfill
3 minutes
this?
and 26 seconds, and it's
So-
Council Services, so.
I appreciate that. So if this is about, if there's two groups, so if it's about the employees that work, I'm going to say on the second floor, they're technically city employees, and they're always welcome to join any of the city's mandatory training. There are a number of mandatory training components, and Kelly can speak to those if you've got questions more broadly. Again, as the supervisor of those city employees, you can also make that a requirement of their employment. If this is about having something mandatory for City Council, committee does have the authority to recommend that City Council does include some additional training, either as part of the orientation for the next council or as part of ongoing development. But again, happy to craft something, but would just look for a tiny bit of guidance if this is around your staff or if this is around elected officials.
I'm talking about for elected officials. Also, just a note, I think Councillor Jan said he didn't have this meeting his calendar for some reason. So I don't.
We do understand some offices may have declined and therefore their meeting
okay.
might not have shown up in their Google Calendar, but we're happy to send the link around.
If you don't
again.
mind. Sorry, and then I just have one more question. Can you just talk a little bit about what the counselor's Google site and the tools that are there for counselors and council offices to use?
Yeah, happy for Victoria to talk about the Google
Please.
site. It was a product of her team's work, so.
Yeah, so with corporate communications, we developed the Google site back in August and provided an opportunity for an info session to talk about some of those resources. Those are just, we have existing still the counselor's office guide, which includes a little more information about how to navigate kind of the city resources. And so those were put into the Google site to make them more navigable, but in doing that process, we were able to kind of look at and expand some of those and put in hyperlinks and things like that. And when talking with, in the development of this program, we've also been finding that there's more information that can be provided, either from administration or we've had some requests from council offices around what would make things more smooth to kind of navigate around the city. So just making sure that that information is easily accessible rather than having that print document or PDF that may be harder to access. Now having a Google site, you can access it on your phone from wherever you are. So.
And the website will have like templates that we can use for our purpose, like letterheads and that kind of stuff.
So we don't currently have those because they're not existing electronic resources, but that's definitely the kind of thing that we can take back and look into if we're able to add that on for things that can be used in the Google site.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Next, Councillor Rice.
Thank you for the report. And just a really quick question. And sometimes when council in the council meeting or committee meetings, we ask certain questions, and then due to the question, the nature of question or information related to question, we say, okay, we will follow up offline. I know everybody's really busy. Sometimes they both drafted. And then is there any process in place right now, or we don't have process to make sure that follow-up information request based on the question councillors asked to be ensured to be received that information?
So that happens during council meetings and
Yeah.
committee meetings,
Yeah.
and each deputy city manager that's responsible for that area does follow up with memos. Those memos are then sent to city council, and I'm copied on each and every one of them. Assuming that there's no privacy issues or FOIP considerations, all of those memos are then added to the open data website, sorry. So they're in two different places. So yes, the accountability resides with the deputy city manager to respond to that information. If there is a motion or an inquiry, then that's tracked within the minutes. But if it's just a follow-up question, depending on the nature, if it's word-specific or if it's general, then a memo is generated.
So I understand that the MIMO, the LOMO one, and come back from MIMO and from other, I'm asked some specific words related information, and then is there any process and how to make sure we did not forget, and then that type of information be
Sorry,
provided.
can you just, I don't know that I'm following the question. Did the clerk's office not respond to an inquiry?
Is not the question. The
Sorry, can you
question
just
councillor
restate the
asked.
question?
Yeah, the questions councillor asked, and in the council meeting or in the committee meeting, specific if sometimes is word related. I'm not talking about the MIMO. I'm talking about word specific related information requested. Sometimes they could not have that information. Sometimes they could have. They say, well, we don't have that information right now. We could follow up offline. And so how is there any process in place make sure that follow up to
If you're
really-
waiting for information related to your ward that you haven't received from administration, I think the most expedient path would be to reach out to that deputy city manager, and I'm sure they'd be happy to provide that information.
Okay, so there is no specific process, just the follow up.
Is that in relation to the I'm just trying to follow how that's related to this item. So I'm just trying to see if I'm following your train of thought here.
Yeah, so specifically, I'm talking about the access to the information.
Yeah,
So,
okay. So
access to the
Google
information.
site is related to the supervision of your staff and related to policies, and I call it the second floor, but all related to sort of the mandate within Council Services Committee. Administration isn't here, because this is typically just about yourself and the management, usually furniture, travel, and other related policies.
I'm sorry, and then I feel like my question is not clear, but I'm not talking about specifically Google site or MIMOs. I'm talking specifically information or or related to the word sometimes could not be provided during the meeting, and because that is not available, I'm talking about that type of information. There is any process could be in place or in place already to really support that information be provided to the words related to issue and for the counselor. That's my question. Yes.
Yeah, so if there's information that's outstanding that you haven't received, you could reach out
Yes,
to the
I
deputy
got
city
your
manager.
answer. I got
If council
answer
would
from
like
you.
us to put in place, I would not suggest formalizing a process to respond to individual questions. The mechanisms that are before council is to make an inquiry or to make a motion, and that requires a formalized tracking process for administration. Not sure if I fully understand the question, so my apologies.
Okay, my apologies, and then I think my question is clear. I just maybe it's not related to the normalized access to the information. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else on the board. I think there might be. Oh, there's Councillor Rutherford.
I just listening to the conversation. Sorry, I just lost my earbud. Just listening to the conversation, I think just while sort of tangential to the report in front of us, just trying to follow up on Councillor Rice's line of questioning. And if I'm understanding correctly, usually even if we want ward related information, it's best practice for that to go to all councillors and then also be publicly available. Correct? Is my understanding correct? So like I know, for example, I've asked specific questions and there's been memos that have come out and they've gone to all of council, even though it's ward specific.
Yeah, I think sometimes it depends, but generally speaking, the principle is if information is provided to one, it's provided to all, either in a memo format, in a report, or a response to inquiry. You're correct.
Yeah, and we all have the inquiry, the ability, like this council has not been using the inquiry methodology as much, I think, as previous councils. Is that a fair statement?
That's correct.
Okay, so we all have the ability, if there's no analysis required, it's just a matter of getting specific information, they can put that on public record and get an inquiry.
That's correct, as long as it
Okay.
meets the timelines, but yes.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Okay, and as long as that information is readily available.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate the report and the recommendations. You know, I was interested in pursuing the two pieces around requiring training, and I'm happy to put some motions on the floor if the chair would be.
This would be a great time for it, please. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'd like to move. Would you like these in two separate motions, two-part motion?
You can do it as one. Yeah. Oh, there you go.
Excellent. So that administration bring forward amendments to the Council Code of Conduct Bylaw 18483 that highlight a duty on members of City Council to become familiar on topics that address systemic barriers, including participation in training related to the City of Edmonton, respectful workplace policy, and art of inclusion. And that is part of the 2025-2029 Council term, administration coordinate and offer additional training related to topics such as Indigenous awareness, anti-racism, respectful and inclusive workplace, diversity and inclusion, and inclusive language.
Perfect. Thank you. Do you want to introduce that?
Yeah, just very briefly, I think Councillor Tang spoke to it well before, that these are expectations that we have of our staff, and then so I think it's reasonable that we show leadership by also undertaking this work. I think it's a great opportunity for us to all expand our knowledge and awareness for the diverse communities that we represent. happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I do see Councillor Principe on the board. You can ask questions about the overall report or the specific motion on the floor as well.
Thank you, Chair Knack. I do have a question about the motion. And so my question is, I noticed the wording, it says training related to. So it's not specifying exactly which, because I had taken one of the city's offered courses of equity and inclusion. I can't remember exactly what the term was of it. So I just want to clarify that we're not saying specifically it must be this course, that, but one related to. Is that correct?
Yeah, so sorry, Councillor
Oh,
Stevenson.
no, I was going to go to you. I was going to say administration suggested this
Sorry,
wording.
to
so.
speak and again, Kelly Buckley's on the call, but again, employee services and administration are always refreshing its courses, so I didn't want to provide the exact titles because things are always fluid, but these are the general themes. And again, council gets to control its own training, and so I think this is broad enough to capture sort of the intention of the motion.
Perfect, because when Councillor Tang was mentioning earlier about the anti-racism one, I thought, well, would the equity and inclusion one be equal to that? Like, I wasn't sure which one we were specifically looking at. So what I'm understanding is that it's the one that's offered by the city at the time, right?
Yeah, and I think we would probably, before bringing forward a program, we would probably have some more dialogue with council to understand council's expectations. I take this as we're working on the transition plan post-election and the orientation, that of course we would always welcome council's input. You went through this 3.5 years ago. We might be wanting to get some feedback from yourself, and this is just a great start in sending us down a certain path. So I think this is broad enough, and again, council will have some opportunities to provide input into its own orientation plan.
Okay, wonderful. And I'm not sure if there's an opportunity at this level or here at this space to look at other offers, not necessarily from the city, but others. I was at an event the other day for ACT Alberta, which is a Action Coalition on Human Trafficking Alberta, and they offer free courses that I wasn't aware of for people to recognize this. Is there any kind of something that we can do so that people are aware, something like the Indigenous Canada course, which is offered by the University of Alberta, which is a free course that I took and anyone can take? Do we have anywhere where we can let people know that this is available for you? I'm not sure if this is the space for us to do that.
Yeah, I think that's actually probably a simpler request to take away. I don't think we need a motion for it, but the Google site was set up originally to coordinate how to respond to these types of requests. Employee Services does have a vast network of understanding what types of training is available out there, so Victoria can coordinate with Kelly, and we can add that to the Google site so you and your offices have easy access. I also worded the motion for Councillor Stevenson broad to include that administration either coordinate or offer additional training in case there were outside agencies that would be perhaps able to come in and support this unique group. Just because you're elected officials, and I don't want to put administration in the position, so sometimes we have brought in outside parties to do training post-election.
Okay, great. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rice.
Thank you for the motion. I think that's intention here is it really reflects, and we try to address some like the system barriers, and as mentioned in there. So I do have some clarification question here. When we talk about like the anti-racism, do we specific topic of those training and inclusive language, and then diversity and inclusion? And by the way, I did all of them, and then voluntarily, and because I think it's really important for us to do this. So right now, there are two questions related to this. Number one, is there any culture pieces and insight? Because the culture sensitivity and the culture background difference, and that is really impact certain interpretation and for certain sense. So is that part of this, or? So I just wondering how that piece could be achieve the goal, and for us to understand the culture sensitivity in the difference and the management style, communication style and the language style as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So my understanding of the art of inclusion is that it's very broad. It's focused on cultural connection, welcoming cultures, races, all of those aspects of diversity and inclusion.
So then my question to our HR and the city administration, I believe Kelly there, and is this type of training, and right now our city of Edmonton has those type of elements inside for this type of training, or if we are going to, like the city clerk mentioned, additional training and hire the outside part and will be included inside and in this motion as a part of the motion.
Sorry, would you mind? I'm not sure.
Because cultural sensitivity is a big topic, it's my understanding from different governments, they do have that specific training for the cultural sensitivity.
Administration might be best placed to respond to what's included. My understanding is that it would involve cultural sensitivity training.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Rice. We don't have a training that is specifically named cultural sensitivity or multiculturalism. However, we have crafted different trainings that speak to those elements in the past for different groups across the city. But our diversity and inclusion offerings, there's 3 different trainings. The introductory one is called Diversity in Ourselves, and it speaks to many of the aspects that you've identified about cultural differences, working in a multicultural setting, how to recognize the different experiences, lived experiences and biases that we all bring to our work. But as Aileen identified, we are constantly iterating our training to make sure that it reflects both what is best practice in community and in the academy in terms of learning.
Yeah, and I think maybe just to add to that, the intent of council taking this training is for us to better understand how we can respond to the people that we interact with and who we have working relationships with, so that we can adjust our styles to better understand their needs and reduce those barriers and create a more inclusive work environment, both in chambers and in our own offices as well.
I really appreciate that clarification, and because that's just so important. It's not only about the people we interacted outside, and also inside and in chamber and then in assembly as well. And that's cultural sensitivity. I do believe it's important and for all of us on the same page. That is why I asked that question. I do have another question about the system barriers, because only including one piece is there. Is there any other pieces there? And is that part 1? Can you be more specific what other things there and for the systematic barriers?
Maybe we can
I think we'll come back to that on a second round, just I don't think you can answer that in 5 seconds. And so we'll come back around. You can click on for that.
Okay, thank you.
Before I go to Councillor Tang, I'm very excited. We have some guests, the only guests for Council Services. It's a pleasure to see you here. This is a committee that, surprisingly, not many people show up to. So I am so excited that you are all here today. These guests are from the grade 6 class with teacher Kay Patry. Is that correct? Yes, excellent. From St. Clement's School in Ward Garhio. And your counselor, Councillor Karen Tang, is right there. And so she is about to ask questions. So now the bar is set high. She has to ask some of the best questions she's ever asked because you are now here. But before we do that, we just want to check in with you. So it's 10 o'clock in the morning. Did you just get to City Hall right now? You're just here for the morning or for the whole day? I see a hand, yes? You're okay, you're just here for the morning. Excellent. So are you about to do a mock council? Excellent. Who's our mayor in this class? I see our mayor right there. Mayor, do you want to come down and tell us what you're about to debate? We'd love to hear from you what you're about to discuss. So you can come right down to this podium and tell us who you are and what item you're about to discuss. Excellent. Please introduce yourself. Let us know who you are.
My name is Anea.
Anea. Excellent, Anea. And what are you about to discuss?
We're discussing about should public transit in Edmonton be free for K-12 students.
Oh, I love that topic. That is so exciting. You're going to hear everyone and go through a whole debate, so I'm sure you haven't made a final decision yet, but do you have an idea of what you're thinking right now? Do you have an idea of where you're leaning on this?
Yes.
What are you thinking right now? Are you in favor of doing that, or are you opposed? Or are you waiting to hear all of the arguments before you make a final decision?
I'm waiting for all the arguments.
That's an excellent mayor. I appreciate that you're going to take some time to think about that. So, well, thank you so much for being here. Please let us know what you decide. We are always interested to hear what is decided in the mock council. But thank you all for joining us. We'll give you a round of applause. Feel free to grab your seats. Stay for as long as you like, but at least for the next 5 minutes so you can hear your city councillor ask questions right now. No pressure, Councillor Tang.
All right, thank you. And well done, Anea, and welcome to City Hall to all the students. I wanted to come back to some of the points. Actually, Councillor Principe jogged my memory. Just even as part of Alberta municipalities, there's pretty extensive training offer for elected officials, and I think Indigenous Canada actually is one of the courses constantly recommended. It's free, it's a great course. When we develop these things for, like, I guess to administration, when you go follow through with these motions, would you kind of look at some of those, like what's already offered that could be just a matter of like recommending that? Yeah.
Kelly, did you want to jump in?
Certainly. Thank you, Councillor Tang. Yes, that is a regular course of our practice. As part of the suite of training on anti-racism that we offer, we highly recommend that people take the free Black Canadians course that the city supported the development of with the U of A. When folks take the mandatory Indigenous awareness training, we highly recommend the Indigenous Canada course. Similarly, the suite of offerings that we provide on GBA Plus, we identify the federal government course on that is free as well. So we're endeavoring to link as many resources as possible to augment people's knowledge and experience with this suite of topics.
Excellent. Yeah, no need to kind of reinvent the wheel when there's so many resources out there already developed. Maybe staying with you, Kelly. I remember when I was working on the city in social development, my colleagues working with immigrant and newcomer communities actually developed a very robust intercultural communication workshop that I remember at the time my entire branch took. So as you develop these art of inclusion and various trainings, would you be reviewing some of those old materials, kind of incorporating those that are already developed?
Yes, that is an ongoing process. We are looking at revamping and updating our anti-racism offerings this year, all of our GBA Plus offerings this year, and some of our inclusion offerings, including the inclusive language training, to make sure that we're capturing what is needed and wanted by our colleagues and community, but also what is being identified as best practice from those with lived experience and the academy and community.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much. And next up, Councillor Rice.
I just want to give the time to Councillor Stevens to answer my last question.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm understanding that your first part one
For the systematic barriers, and so what I would like to know what will be covered under that, because I really like how you wording this, but I want to know the detail be covered under that piece.
Sure. So the wording is not mine. I appreciate the compliment. So I think that the folks developing this training would be best placed to speak to some of that detail. At a high level, the intent is to understand what issues Edmontonians may face in interacting with us, and again, how we can promote, full democratic involvement of all Edmontonians.
Because this training is to specifically and to the member of council, and then that is why I really want to know what is covered on that piece. And the systematic barriers, we use this term so many like outside and different place, and then I want to know and what does that mean to our council's training.
Yeah, I think, again, if administration had some insights that they could share.
Yeah, so just to remind everybody, so the first step on the first motion would actually be to work with the Ethics Advisor and Integrity Commissioner and Legal Services to bring back potential amendments to the Code of Conduct. So that would be a check that Council would then have. Based on the great questions that have come up today, happy to work with Kelly and Employee Services, and we could bring back, the motion is very high level, happy to bring back supplementary information before Council would be voting on any bylaw amendments related to its code, and I think that would hopefully answer the questions that have been raised here today.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. That's all my questions. I'm looking forward to the details under that specific term, systematic barriers.
Thank you very much. Councillor Principe.
Thank you, Chair Knack. Something that Councillor Stevenson had mentioned kind of made me think. She said of how we interact with Edmontonians, which obviously is very important. That's the, prime point of our position. But it's also about how we interact with each other, like different lived experiences, different cultures. And would that be encompassed in this as well?
Yeah, absolutely. That's my understanding. It's really about deepening our knowledge so that we interact in a better way with everyone we interact with, including our colleagues and our staff.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rutherford.
Yeah, thank you. This conversation is really timely because I was actually just at the WAVE advisory meeting on Tuesday of this week in the evening. And one of the questions that was asked from some of the WAVE members was about the training that counselors receive. And one of the questions, and I see it as a gap here, so I'd be remiss if I didn't ask it on behalf of the WAVE Council, because they asked me, was around the trauma-informed, if we do any kind of trauma-informed work. When we're dealing with people in the public, when we're dealing with people with diverse backgrounds, even as counselors, we're all from diverse backgrounds. We don't know everybody's past experience. Is there any work that is done from a trauma-informed lens as components of any of this training that's recommended here? And I guess that's first to administration.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Rutherford. A trauma-informed lens is one of the many methods of analysis that we use when we're developing our training. So it is part of how we build our gender-based analysis plus training. It informs our diversity and inclusion training. It is a critical element of our anti-racism training. We don't have a specific training called trauma-informed training, but we support our mental health and healthy living team, who uses a trauma-informed practice with all of their work. It's built into the peer support teams. So it is something that is extensive across administration. And if it was a need that surfaced for counselors as we build out, working in partnership with you in coordination, that is something that we could certainly explore.
Yeah, and I think even, there's a difference between sort of what we consider mandatory, but then, some of the, personal development that any given counselor chooses to do. Would you be able to share if you're aware of any trauma-informed training, at least with my office? And I'm sure maybe just again based on the conversation we've already had, it's always beneficial if one counselor inquires that it goes to all counselors for that, any courses or things that even external from the city that a counselor may be willing to take up on trauma-informed practice.
For sure. When Victoria and I are connecting to identify those training opportunities that can go into the Google site, I can certainly work with my team and identify any offerings that relate to trauma-informed practice. Absolutely.
Perfect. And the art of inclusion and other training covers LGBTQ2SIA plus content and stuff as
Yes,
well, right?
that is very much part of the diversity aspect of the communities that we serve and that we need to consider in terms of the lived experience and how they experience public policy.
Okay, perfect. Those are all my questions. Like I said, it was very timely because we just had this question at the WAVE meeting this week. So very serendipitous. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else on the board for questions. Anyone wishing to speak to it? Please click on. Not seeing anyone. Councillor Stevenson to close.
Yes, thank you very much. You know, I think this morning has been a great opportunity to reflect on the shared responsibility that we all have to develop good relationships with each other, with our staff, with administration, and with the public. You know, better understanding others' experiences and perspectives and our own blind spots can really help us to reflect on our own behaviors and how they may impact others. It's also a great opportunity to support all Edmontonians to fully participate in civic life, which helps us make better decisions and strengthens our community for everyone. So encourage my colleagues to support and look forward to the work ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Please vote.
Just checking if Councillor Hamilton has joined just yet. Thank you. Just waiting on one more vote. Councillor Jans?
In favor.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We have all the...
Thank you. Please display the vote. And that is carried. Excellent. Next item is item 3.2, attending events outside of ward verbal reports. And we'll turn it over to, I believe, Madam Clerk and our Ethics Advisor Integrity Commissioner have a few opening comments.
Apologies from the Integrity Commissioner. She had something come up this morning, but the Ethics Advisor, Brent Rothgeber, is on the line and is happy to provide some introductory remarks just related to the section of the code. If we could just clear the screen.
Yeah, well, we're just getting it all set up here.
Yeah, give us 2 seconds,
Yep.
Brent. We're just doing something so that we can see you on the screen. There we go. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Clerk and Mr. Chair and members of council. It's always an honor for me to talk about ethics and ethical conduct among politicians, and especially so given that 2025 is a municipal election year. So the short answer, I was asked to give a high-level overview of the rules and I would say more the niceties regarding dealing with constituents that don't live in your ward. And the short answer to your question is, or the short answer to the question that I've been asked to speak about is, there is no hard and fast rules. But I will come back to that through my very brief presentation. So we'll start with the code, and we'll start with Part B, dealing with communications, and paragraph 3. Is that feedback on my end, or is that something else?
We can hear you well in here,
Okay.
Brent.
Good. Okay, if a councillor becomes aware of or receives an inquiry that is ward-specific constituency issue relating to another councillor's ward, the councillor will refer that matter to the ward councillor or request that the person contact the ward councillor or alternatively the mayor. So the hard and fast rule is specific with respect to constituency concerns regarding ward-specific constituency issues. Now, it's problematic not so much because of its narrow scope, it's because of ward-specific constituency is not defined. And I wouldn't be able to tell you with any specificity what that means. So as a lot of you know, I live in Council Rutherford's riding. I live in the Calder neighborhood. If there was an issue concerning the Calder Community League and they have to repair the roof, one could argue that that's a local constituency ward. Although people come from all over North Edmonton, and I suspect South Edmonton as well, to attend events at that hall. So perhaps it's not a ward-specific matter. And to make it further complicated, there's a cenotaph on the grounds of the Calder Community League, and of course on Remembrance Day in November, people come, veterans and non-veterans come from all over the city, primarily North Edmonton, but not exclusively, to attend Remembrance Day services. So if there was an issue regarding the repair, I'm not sure that that's a city responsibility, but for the sake of argument, let's say it is. So if there was an issue regarding the repair of that cenotaph, is that specific to Councillor Rutherford's ward? I think it's not, because it affects veterans and non-veterans from all over the city. So I think what is truly a ward-specific constituency or matter is a pretty narrow set of issues. And again, I mean, I think the most local of any issues might be repair to a local road, snow removal. Potholes is a good one. I mean, potholes, I think at first glance is specific to the person making the complaint that has a pothole at the end of his or her driveway. But potholes is not specific to any specific constituency, and arguably all of you receive inquiries and complaints from constituents in each of your wards regarding the state of repair of roads in all residential streets all over the city. So none of which helps us answer the question which I've been asked to answer today, and that's with respect to correspondence, with respect to meetings, with respect to politicking. So we'll start with the conclusion that there is no hard rule, and I think it has to be that way because it would be impossible to enforce in any event. If a councillor is at a religious ceremony, you know, at a church or cathedral or synagogue or mosque, obviously there's going to be people from more than one ward, regardless of in whose ward that particular religious institution is located. So I think common sense has to come into this. And I think it's important that councillors, you know, get some perspective from constituents, whether they live in his or her ward or not. So we couldn't enforce a hard rule that you can't communicate with constituents outside of your ward anyways. So we might as well strictly rely on the prohibition in the code, which deals only with constituency issues relating to a specific ward, as opposed to the broader conversation regarding correspondence. We're in an election year. Some of you may be running for mayor. So it's obvious that those individuals are going to want to talk to constituents that aren't in their specific ward currently, and that has to be allowed and it has to be accommodated. Now, I hearken back to my time in federal politics, where again there was no rule, but there was a consideration that if a minister, well, if another member of parliament, or specifically if a minister or the prime minister were coming into your constituency, that you would give the local member of parliament notice. And if there was an event, you would invariably invite the local member to attend and then acknowledge that member at the event. Now, again, it was not a rule. It was, I mean, there's no code of conduct for federal politicians, but that's not a rule, but it was a convention and a consideration that I think was near universally applied and adopted. And I think there might be application for that when it comes to councillors. And over the years, I think I'm in my 6th or 7th year now, I've tried to import some of those principles into attending events in other people's constituencies or wards. And I think maybe that created more confusion than it solved. However, I still believe that if you are attending an event in another councillor's ward, I think the consideration is that you notify that individual and ideally invite them to come along. And at the end of the day, it's the sponsor of the event, whether it's a community league or an organization or a religious organization. I mean, ultimately, it's up to them to invite whomever they want to their events and to call upon to speak whoever they choose. That's the organizer's choice. It's not the councilor's choice. So, and that needs to be respected. So as hard as one might feel when one appears to be excluded from an event that's in one's ward, I don't know why the organizer chose to invite another councillor, but they did, and I think that preference needs to be respected. Subject to, I think the nicety is that you should invite the local ward councillor, and at the very least introduce him or her at the event if for whatever reason they're not invited to speak. So all of which is to say, there is no code prohibition. So if you don't do what I'm suggesting you might want to do, and it's only a suggestion, it's not going to be the basis for a formal code of complaint inquiry. I talked to the Integrity Commissioner yesterday, and she confirms that she would not investigate a complaint regarding attending events in somebody else's riding or ward. But nonetheless, you just finished a good, wholesome dialogue on respectful interaction with your fellow councillors, and I think this is part and parcel of that. That you should at the very least give we'll call the individual, the host ward councillor, a heads up that you're coming, and if it's okay with the organizer, invite them to attend. So with that confusion, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate you sharing those details. We'll open the floor up to questions. This had been selected by Councillor Tang, and so we'll start with Councillor Tang.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I know this is not the first time we are having this discussion. I think at the last council services, we've also had this discussion. I know similar kinds of interactions or perhaps people not respecting the niceties that you described, Brent, came up last, council term. And, as you noted, going into an election year. I guess I'm just wondering, last time, I thought it was clear, but now I'm actually not sure. I'm wondering if there's a way to codify some of this. For example, I'm looking at the Google site, and there's a page around invitation, and wondering, this is not policy per se, and we can only expect people to follow these niceties based on, their own inclination, but I guess I'm just wondering, I don't know if it's to Brent or to Aileen, thoughts about codifying some of this.
Well, the code of conduct, thank you for the good question, Councillor Tang. The code of conduct, you own it, it belongs to you, and you can amend it. I think it's unlikely that it could be possibly logistically be amended this year or before the October election. And my only caveat with amending the code is rigid rules are going to be impossible to enforce.
Yeah.
So I think if council and administration were inclined to codify some of what I consider conventions or niceties, it would have to balance that with some flexibility, largely because of the inability to enforce any hard provisions, and also because not only is it not practicable to enforce a councillor not talking to councillors or constituents from a different ward, it's not practical, and it's not good. I mean, you should be able to talk to whomever you want to. And I mean, if you're in the grocery store and you run into somebody that you know from a different ward and they have a problem with the city, you should be able to discuss that with them. You shouldn't only get the perspectives of your constituents. So I would strongly recommend that if it would take some time and some really considered thought, but that the balance would have to be between flexibility.
Yeah, I'm not so much talking about constituency, like running to people in the grocery store and how should you behave and that kind of stuff. I guess I'm more thinking in the capacity of event attendance, which is exactly what we talked about at the last council services. At the bare minimum, adhering to the deputy mayor's protocol in an official capacity, I think something we all kind of understand, but I'm not sure. I mean, unless it's already codified somewhere, and I'm just missing it.
It's not, and you're not. I've suggested that from time to time that the deputy mayor or the mayor be have the right of first refusal, that the ward-specific councillor have the right of first refusal with respect to the event, failing which it should go to the mayor or the deputy mayor. But as you correctly pointed out, Councillor, that's created probably more problems than it's solved. So if it appears that I'm contradicting advice that I've given previously, I admit. My thinking has evolved over the last few years and the problems that created. So the short answer is there's no prohibition, except with ward-specific issues, which are not really even defined. There's no prohibition. I do believe you should be considerate to your fellow councillors, but I don't think that can be enforced. And I think at the end of the day, you really have to be deferential to the organizers of the event. If they have invited somebody to an event, that should be respected.
Yeah, and I think this is something we also talked about last time, is that we can't expect community members to understand city hall protocols and, that kind of stuff. And this is why I guess I'm suggesting something in writing to refer to, rather than leaving it up to host organizers, however the intent, whatever the intention is. But leaving it, because I think sometimes it can actually put organizers in very difficult positions, very awkward positions. And I think that's why we have some of these protocols, right?
Agreed. It puts organizers, especially, unsophisticated, if I can use that word, volunteer organizations who are unfamiliar with any of these protocols or rules and may not even be all that familiar with the boundaries, which change from time to time.
Absolutely.
So yes, all of that is going to have to be taken into consideration. It's going to have to be nuanced and it's going to have to be balanced. But in the interim, there's no rule. The rule only applies to ward-specific constituency issues, not to events.
I'm out of time. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Rutherford?
Yeah, so I'm a bit confused from our previous conversation. Conduct doesn't specify this, but there are two clauses in the Code of Conduct. Part 2 says no councillors may engage in or make representations on behalf of the city unless authorized to do so by council. So then we have policies and procedures in place for that if they're not being adhered to would be a code of conduct violation, which would include the deputy mayor roster. And then it says in Part D, councillors will comply with all approved policies and will approve policy. So and I think this is that codification that Councillor Tang is talking about. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the code of conduct, because I feel like the code of conduct already speaks to those things. But if we're missing if there's a policy gap, should there be a policy or should it be more codified there? Or is it clear enough around our deputy mayor roster, for example? So I guess that's my question, because when I read those two clauses and how I've been following those is very different. And I think that, your example of somebody being a mayoral candidate and coming to events, they can come to an event in Calder, for example, as a mayoral candidate. They shouldn't be there representing themselves as a city councillor for another ward, and trying to leverage those connections for their campaign benefit. Correct?
I agree with you philosophically. I'm not sure that distinction can be made practically. Is the mayoral candidate going to make a caveat on his or her attendance that they're there in their role only as a candidate? Maybe, I don't know. That's going to be awkward. But I like the idea. Well, I do and I don't like the idea of putting in some logistical parameters around attending events in other constituents' wards. But you need to be mindful that if it's not in the code of conduct, it cannot lead to a complaint that leads to an investigation that could lead to a possible sanction. There could be other rounds.
So if we have policies in place that a councillor is explicitly not following, that would not be a code of conduct violation.
Not currently. I talked to the integrity.
It says adherence to rules. Councillors will comply with council approved policies.
Well, you'd have to raise that with the integrity commissioner, who unfortunately is not here. But I checked with her yesterday, and this specific issue, if there was a complaint, she wouldn't investigate it, or at least she told me she wouldn't investigate it, and I think her interpretation is correct.
But why would we like this? What? Okay, I find this conversation a little bit more frustrating and contradictory to the previous conversation, because if we have, why have a code of conduct at all if we're not going to have any like actual ability to, I mean, we have a code of conduct because we're required legislatively, but if it's just it seems like a farce then if we have policies that won't be investigated, even if a counselor now or in the future is flagrantly not adhering to those policies.
I think I can answer that from a lawyer's legal perspective, that because of the provision, I think it's paragraph 3, regarding ward-specific constituency issues, because council has chose to prohibit that or to make that a violation that could be subject to a code of conduct investigation. I think that excludes other boundary ward councillor versus councillor complaints that don't fit within the parameters of paragraph B3. Now, one could argue that council, and it wasn't your council that passed this code, it was the previous one. One could infer that they considered events.
Well, we updated this code.
Sure.
We actually had a whole committee, and it's updated as of November 13th, 2024.
Fair enough. Well, even more to the point then, one as legislative interpretation, one could infer that you considered it and chose not to prohibit or to put any rules around events. I don't know if that's a fair inference or not. I know what the code says. I know what could lead to a investigation, and I think the better answer to your question, Councillor Rutherford, is I think it's unenforceable. I mean, I think having councillors attend events and talking to constituents, whether they're in their role as councillor or future mayor, I think it's unenforceable. And
okay, thank you.
And quite frankly, maybe pointless, because I do think there's value in obtaining perspectives from people from outside your work.
All right.
Absolutely, and we get those all the time. Thank you.
I'll jump in. I think what I'm trying to understand, Mr. Athgaber, and so I'm going to give a few examples, and I think these relate back to some of our older examples when we had this conversation last. And so there's a lot of variables in this, because one comes down to who was invited, how they were invited, so that plays into it, I believe, as well in this conversation. So, for example, if a community league within the ward I represent is hosting a community league day event and they're having a barbecue, chances are, and this has been my experience in most of my time, they don't send an invite to all of council. They let me know what's happening because it's a local community league. It's a local event on a community league day specific event. So that might be treated differently if somebody showed up to that event, especially if there weren't other invites sent, versus there is a cultural group that has rented out a community league hall within the ward I represent, and they have sent out invitations to everyone, and that's where the nuance would come in. At least to me, I do view those two things as very different. So even if there was an event at the same hall and you use Calders, so a Remembrance Day event where people from across the city can come, I think it would be in good practice that if I were showing up to the Calder event for that, or I show up to the West Edmonton Mall one, which is now outside of the ward I represent, I like to defer to the ward councillor, Councillor Hamilton, who is the ward councillor for that area, to take the lead. That is different than if somebody has shown up to a local barbecue for residents specifically within the community that I represent. Do you view those two separately? And I guess more importantly, does the code view that separately?
Well, the code does not, because the code doesn't talk about attending events in other people's wards. Yeah. I do view them slightly differently. And I start from a very foundational principle that you can't prevent people from coming to events in your ward. You physically cannot do it. So then the issue becomes, how do you handle it? How do you manage it? And try to prevent a really awkward situation, or even a more awkward situation than has already been created, probably by the organizers who don't understand the nuances of the event. So I believe, and I've said this time and time again, although this is not in the code, that if you are attending an event outside of your ward, and I don't really see a difference whether it's a community hall, community function, or if it's a community hall rented by a more generic organization that just happens to be paying rent for holding an event that day. I think the nicety, the consideration that ought to be provided is that you provide the ward councillor with notice that you're going to be asked to attend an event and you're going to be attending. And secondly, if you've been asked to speak, that you are going to speak, or you've been asked to speak and you've accepted that invitation. And again, I think there has to be a fair degree of deference to the organizers. If they want you to speak, you should speak, but you should give the courtesy to the ward councillor that this is what is going to happen. And I would think and hope that there's enough goodwill among councillors that at the very least you'll acknowledge the ward councillor's presence if the ward councillor is not being asked to speak by the organizers. But as I've said, that there's really no way to enforce that. Currently, it's not in the code, it's not even in the policies. We can get into debate over whether a breach of a policy can lead to a code complaint and investigation. I suspect in some circumstances it can and will. But I want to preempt all of that. I mean, I think this thing can largely be settled, and if you all play nice in the sandbox and acknowledge who the ward councillor is and that they happen to be in the audience, I think that solves everything.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think that's, if I remember back to the previous conversation, that was sort of where we landed. And the question is, and this is always the messy debate, is in practice, that's the way we want to do it. If there are folks, I can think of some examples last term where maybe that didn't always happen. And so do you get to the point where do you try to write something in? But I'm talking to myself versus asking a question, and I'm out of time. So I'm going to go to Councillor Principe.
Thank you, Chair Knack. Mr. Rathgeber, I have a question about, is there a difference between bringing greetings from the city and just bringing greetings?
I don't know. You are a councillor. You will be a councillor, until you cease to be a councillor, either through an election or I guess some other means. Now, I need to think about this a little bit more, Councillor LaPrune, but my knee-jerk reaction is yes, there is. Besides being a councillor, you're also a private citizen. I mean, you attend events in your personal capacity, family events, Thanksgiving, Christmas. I'm guessing when you go to Christmas dinner, you don't bring greetings on behalf of the city of Edmonton, but you might bring greetings on behalf of yourself and your family. It's really, really good to be here, and I'm looking forward to the turkey. So yes, I think there is a distinction to be made, and I think it's possible you can bring greetings on behalf of yourself and not the city.
So here,
I'd have to think about what that distinction means in real terms.
So, I'll give you an example. Like, if I was invited to a community event at, within the ward that I represent, a community event, but maybe it's a cultural event, but it didn't go through posse. It wasn't asking for me to bring greetings from the city. When I go through posse, I will say, I am here on behalf of City Council. When I go to one within the ward, I will just say, hi, I'm Karen Principe, the city councillor here. I don't necessarily bring greetings from the city, from council. I bring it from myself. So I don't know if there's a distinction there.
I mean, I think there is a distinction, but it might be a distinction without a difference. I mean, your code of conduct applies to you 24/7. I mean, if you're in an event in your official capacity or in an unofficial capacity and you're disrespectful to the other attendees, that's a violation of the code. So I don't know. So I think I'm going to say, I'm going to think about this a little bit more because I've never been asked that before. So yes, I think you can bring greetings from yourself without it necessarily being, there's no official City of Edmonton scroll or proclamation by the mayor. I think it can be done. I don't know what difference that makes to any of this. I suspect that if this event was in somebody else's ward, if it in fact was a public event, and if the local ward councillor didn't want you there, I think they would be bent out of shape whether you brought greetings on behalf of yourself or on behalf of the city. So I think it's a bit of a distinction without a difference. But I'm going to think about that a little bit because I've never been asked that. I've never been asked that before. It's a good question.
Okay, so like another example, sometimes we're all like there are several counselors that will go to an event and someone will be bringing greetings from the city, but the organizers will ask all of us to say a few words. So is that appropriate? So far in my experience with this council, everyone has been gracious and accepting of that. And just want to ensure that we're, being respectful also to the people that have invited us and asked us to say a few words. Is it still appropriate for us to do that?
Absolutely. I mean, as I said, I think the first deference, the first priority should be the organizers of the event. They're the ones that are hosting the event and have invited one or more councillors. And I think their preferences ought to be respected. And if they want everybody to do a 2-minute speech, awesome. If they want one person to speak on behalf of all three of you, I think the preference needs to be respected. But as again, I think an acknowledgement has to be made of the other councillors who are in attendance, whether they're the local ward councillor or from another visiting ward. I think all elected officials, federal, provincial, municipal, school boards, they should all be acknowledged by whoever gets the mic, and based on whatever the organizer wants, who the organizer wants to give the mic to.
Okay, great. I absolutely agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice.
Thank you very much. And I listened carefully. I think most of my questions are answered. My colleagues asked wonderful questions. So I heard very clear the organization's preference for them, how they invited council members and who they want to invite. Council members needs to be highly respected. I heard that very clear. I do have just additional one question about specifically with some council member has their own culture heritage background, and for those organization across the entire city, they celebrate the culture celebration, so they feel pride and to invite their councillor and with their own culture background, and then for that piece, and many times they may not have the formal invitation to go posse. They just invited the councillor with that culture background, and in that many cases, so they request the culture they request that councillor to speak on behalf of their culture heritage. So there is nothing wrong with that, right?
Thank you for that question, Councillor Rice. Yeah, my answer doesn't change. If a person of a certain background, or it might not even be a linguistic background, and maybe it's because this, a person represents a current profession. Maybe they're an accountant, so maybe the accountants ask them to speak to their annual general meeting, even though the meeting is downtown and the accountant comes from a outlying ward. None of that changes what I've said. There's no hard and fast rules. I think the courtesy is to give deference to the organizers and to acknowledge any other councillors and any other elected officials that happen to be in the room. And if it's just one other councillor, especially the local ward councillor, I think the courtesy and I think the respectful thing to do is to ask the organizer if it's okay if the local ward councillors say a couple words, but then again, you need to be deferential to that answer.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Oh, I should have clicked back on. I had one more set of questions. I'm just going to start talking, and I'm sure it will work. Our city clerk had put in the chat the previous report that had been discussed, and it included an attachment from December 2023, which sort of talked about how attendance is determined. So I guess I wanted to check on that, and within that it talks about how it's determined who sort of is the lead person to speak. So I guess my question to you, Mr. Rathgaber, is that this is something that we have in writing, but I don't believe it is I don't think it's considered policy anywhere. But does that give it? I don't know if you have this attachment or if you had access to this attachment. Yeah, it sounds like you might.
I don't, but I know what you're referring to.
Okay, I guess I'm curious. Looking at that seems to answer, in a way, it's sort of a written version of our unwritten rules right now.
So as I indicated, thank you, Chairman Knack. I, over the years, have tried to put in some informal protocols as to and I used words like rights of first refusal, that the local ward council had the right of first refusal, and if they didn't want to go or couldn't go or were in a conflict, they're out of town, that it would go to the mayor or the deputy mayor, and after that, it was a free-for-all to whoever was available. I mean, I still think there's some validity to that, but as I said in my opening comments, I think that may have created more problems than it solved. So, and I would say, if I'm reversing myself, I acknowledge that my thinking has evolved on this topic, because quite frankly, I wasn't anticipating the amount of conflict that it would create. So, I think in the absence of formal rules, we're left with what is in the code, and there is no prohibition in code, save for ward-specific issues that are not defined. But I think that there should be some, I mean, the informal rules that which you refer to, Councillor Knack, are nothing more than common courtesy and common sense.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I think those should be a guiding principle. I think, you know, if the local ward councillor has not been invited, I think they should be included somehow if they're available. But ultimately, I guess to some extent, I've changed my deference or my priority from the local ward councillor to the organizers of the event. And I say that only because the way it was before, and still is unenforceable and is leading to hard feelings amongst councillors. So if we take it out of the hands of the councillors and put it in, well, except for the courtesy of inviting other councillors to attend, and leave it in the hands of the organizers, I think that's actually a better solution. And I say that all because all of it's unenforceable anyways.
Okay, so so essentially the way I understand your perspective is that you would still continue to look at, you know, what's listed in that attachment as an ideal way to try to proceed. You know, this would be good practice for all of us to follow. It would be, I think, ideally kind towards one another and showing a sort of a mutual respect. But you would hesitate to make that more formal, because even if we did, that might make it challenging or still impossible for any type of enforcement.
Yeah, I would say the guidelines in that document are persuasive, but not binding.
Yeah.
And if council wants to do something formal, that's your right and your prerogative. Mm-hmm. And I will participate in that process if I'm asked to.
Sure.
But I put the following caveat on right out of the chute, that flexibility is going to have to be balanced with strict rules.
Yeah.
Because each one of these situations is different. Sometimes, you know, all 13 of you are invited.
Yeah.
Sometimes only one of you is invited and you're the ward councillor. And sometimes only one of you is invited and you're not the ward councillor. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's impossible to create rules to accommodate all of those and many other scenarios and combinations of invitations. So I would prefer informal rules and common sense and courtesy. I think those have to be the guiding principles.
Okay. Thank you. I'm out of time. Councillor Wright?
Thank you. I totally agree with your outlook about playing nice in the sandbox. I think I made reference to that last week at another meeting. But so when you talk about leaving it up to the organization, so that's where the organization reaches out directly to the councillors to invite them. That's not then maybe if a follow-up were to occur by a non-ward councillor saying, you know, I'd like to do this or that. So like either bring greetings or whatever. So we leave it up to the organization to do that outreach and whatever they decide.
Yeah, yes, and quite frankly, I cannot imagine an organization, a volunteer organization, declining a request for a 2-minute greeting from any counselor. I just can't imagine why they would deny a counselor that wants to be there and say a few words the opportunity to do so. And so, having been involved in quite a number of these, or a fair number of these over the last 4 or 5 years, the angst and the upsettedness is not from the organizers; it's from the counselors.
Mm-hmm.
Who, and I respectfully, I'm going to say this. I mean, I think some counselors believe that they have some sort of monopoly of control within their respective boundaries, and I think that's inconsistent with code, and I think it's completely unenforceable and impractical and unhealthy for a democracy. So I think there needs to be more courtesy and more flexibility, and ultimately, if it can't be resolved, it has to be resolved by the organizer.
Okay, so like for instance, I attend a lot of events that are in Councillor Tang's ward because just the way the crossover of constituents are in the southeast, and so and I'm fine to it's Councillor Tang's ward, although like I said there is that crossover of constituents. But I've had like the organizers reach out and say, would you be able to present certificates, and certificates that they themselves have prepared and provided. But I wouldn't, I don't know, so that's okay to do. I don't think I would reach out, having been invited to an event and say, oh, hey, by the way, can I, speak, or can I, provide these items or whatever. So is that what you're saying? So I wouldn't be the one to then go back to the organizers and say, I want to do this, this, and this. If they reach out to me and ask me to do something, then that's okay. Again, letting the ward councillor know.
Yeah, I mean that falls squarely into my deference to the organizer protocol. But again, if this event's going to occur outside of your ward, I would give the local councillor a heads up that you're coming in, and ideally invite them. And if they take you up on your invitation, I would share the spotlight with them. Quite frankly, because you're in their ward, and I mean there shouldn't be any political concerns regarding including other councillors, because it's only electors in your council, in your ward, that can vote for you or not vote for you anyway.
Right.
So I don't entirely understand and I'm not specific to you, Councillor Wright, but the non-collaborative approach that some people take with respect to these events. I just really don't understand it. But to the extent that it exists, I think it's the organizers of the event that send out the invites, and they get to do the program, and that needs to be, the program's going to say who's speaking and who's going to be handing out certificates, and that needs to be respected.
Okay, and I like that perspective too about the vote thing. We're not in competition with one another, right?
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tang?
I'll move to receive information.
Thank you. I'll accept that motion. Any other questions, Councillor Tang? No. Councillor Rice, questions?
I think the question's answered.
Great. I don't see anyone else on the board for questions, so anyone wishing to speak to it? I think I see at least one person clicking on. Wait, I'll go to the board because there were people. The board has disappeared. There it is. Councillor Rice, are you on for speaking, or is that a remain from previous?
That's his remain from
Okay,
premise, and then from speaking, I believe my colleagues before me.
Yeah, no problem. Councillor Tang will be to close. Councillor Rutherford?
Yeah, just thank Brent for that information, and I just want to say I'm not sure the context entirely. I want to just give kudos to the neighboring ward councillors and every councillor I've experienced. I haven't had an experience like this. I think Karen and I have a lot of crossover. Karen Principe and I, to be clear, which Karen, have a lot of crossover with Castle Downs, and we have a vested interest in working together and being at events together. And we've always done that with grace, and I've always felt that way. Same with my other neighboring councillor, Councillor Knack. I've never felt that we haven't worked together. So I just want to say that I'm always welcoming to all councillors joining events in the ward, and have demonstrated that through my time with my neighboring councillors. That being said, I am a little bit concerned about, I think clear is kind and unclear is unkind. And when we have some things around our protocol for events, like, let's just follow the rules. Like, let's just follow the rules that are in place. And it makes everything work so much better in terms of, especially when we are going to have speaking on behalf of the city, or protocol items like a certificate that's being presented on behalf of the city. I think that following that discussion that was outlined in the steps from 2023 is a really strong practice for us to continue with going forward. I do want to say, though, that I think that you're right in your assessment right now that it works that way. I would be remiss if I don't mention Bill 20 and how it's going to ruin that going forward, because we right now don't have party dynamics. And so I'm working with every colleague in the council on an issue by issue basis. So for example, with Councillor Principe around Northside issues and Castle Downs, and like, we talk a lot, like, even though the Northgate Transit Center is in her ward, a lot of Greasebah residents use that transit center. So we collaborate, and it's on an issue by issue basis that best serves the residents. When in the next 4 years, I am concerned that this code of conduct isn't going to stand, this sort of like courtesy isn't going to stand the test of time if party dynamics are getting involved in this process. Because then you have, and campaign periods, I would like to remind everybody that's listening, will start January 1st of 2026. And they will run the entirety of the thing. So if you have parties and you have now people that win in the next election that are members of parties, and they're different from the person who is in a different party in that specific ward, but they're also campaigning for the entire time, it's going to really muddy the waters. And I think that this is a great example of how Bill 20 is absolutely not helping the situation. And in fact, is going to make it worse, and make it so that we're not just looking at serving the residents of Edmonton, but rather serving the parties that we are representing, and making sure that those parties have that representation across the city. So I think there is a bigger conversation that will have to be had in the next term around how that's playing out. But for now, I appreciate how it's worked for me as a counselor. In my experience with the neighboring counselors, that's the ones I've had the most experience with. I've never really had too many other counselors coming to events in the ward I represent, but would welcome that. But definitely can speak to my neighboring counselors and appreciate the relationship that we've had and the work that we've done collaboratively in our overlapping areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stevenson.
Well, thank you very much. Just a few thoughts for reflection. I appreciate this coming. Sorry, I'll just. Okay. Yeah, I think this is good timing for this to come forward. It's a good refresher as we head into an election year, which will likely have more community events and more weight and meaning behind our appearances at those events. As we have spoken about the importance of separating our roles as city councillors and candidates, I think now more than ever, it's really important that we also reflect how we're showing up in different communities. We do all serve all Edmontonians, but continuing to show courtesy for ward councillors in the areas they serve, I think just demonstrates mutual respect and helps us move forward together. I too am very lucky to have had the experience of colleagues reaching out and approaching this work collaboratively. I think when that happens, there are no issues to worry about. So again, appreciate the conversation and appreciate the reminder of the importance of courtesy as we move forward in the year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rice.
So thank you very much, and I appreciate this conversation. And then, like my colleagues said very well, and as a city councillor, we're not only serve our own words, we actually here to demonstrate that collaboration to serve our entire city, Edmontonians as a whole. And I think that is really important as our role to connect and engage and with the community. So today, and I heard lots of good questions, and in terms of how the organization will invite its councillors, how the culture group or religion group, and then to celebrate have their ceremonies and invite all councillors. And for myself, and since I become councillor, I'm always open to welcome any of my colleagues come to my ward to join any culture celebration, like this type of things, because it's demonstrate our council, we are united together, and we are collaborate together, we are respect each other, and then to support Edmontonians on the different culture celebration event. So I know myself, and then because my word and close to Councillor Tan's word, and also in my word, actually is really multicultural areas. There are many racialized communities. They organize lots of celebration in the different words, and usually I received lots of this type of invitation, including Filipino community, including Indian community, and including Black communities. But I really respect and what organizers would like me to do, and then I do not want give them message or demonstrate some message say we do not want to support the communities, and no matter what the communities invitation come out, if they come out through PASE, that is our formal channel, I think that is important for us to follow that, Deputy Mayor last. But if they invite individual councillors, I think it's so important to respect the organization's preference, and then to respect and follow the rules, and to do certain things, and not go there to do something or speak something on behalf of the council, only go there and then on behalf of the councillor individually. So I think this type of conversation really gets those flasher, and we already have the many discussion before there. So I appreciate this type of conversation. So I would be very concerned, and if council established any procedure that would restrict a member of council from participating in any culture events and celebrations or ceremonies, especially if those events are tied to the council members' culture heritage. And to add some additional context, members of various ethnic heritage groups often have feelings of pride and find great meaning when a member of their own ethnic heritage group enters public office and formally participating in their culture celebrations or ceremonies. And I would be further concerned if council established any procedure that would interfere with an event organizer from invite specific members of council and to participate in their events. I also would like to clarify that my councillors pertain to citywide events and that are attended by Edmontonians who travel to the event from across our city. And those councillors do not pertain to the world events, such as those organized and hosted by a member of council where only the council members were residents attending. So that is a big difference, I think, to this conversation. I'll really clarify all those. So I thank our ASIC advisor to be here, answer our question and provide some clarification. And also I thank the great questions and from my colleagues. And so welcome to my ward and for any culture celebration. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Paquette?
Oh, thank you. I don't have a lot to say, just that communication is the key to all good relationships, and mature adults usually engage in proactive and constructive communication. So that might be something to keep in mind. Common courtesy, maybe that should be in the same breath as common sense. So I'm actually a little bit gobsmacked by the whole conversation. Just be cool. It's not the toughest thing in the world. Just be cool, be courteous, and communicate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette. I'll just quickly jump in here. Yeah, I appreciate the conversation. I'm sort of thinking a lot about Councillor Rutherford's comments, closing comments, and I do worry a little bit with what is coming and how that will influence sort of how we're working. Fortunately, I can say over most of the 11 and a half years, personally, I haven't run into any issues within the ward I represent and the neighboring wards and my council colleagues that I've served with, particularly in neighboring wards. But I also can say I have heard, I think about last term there were good examples, and I'm not going to rehash them, but I certainly know of examples where that common courtesy wasn't extended and it created some tense situations, and I could see that being amplified in a situation. So I hear Mr. Rathgeber's caution, if you will, that it is probably hard to create something. At the same time, I very much hear Councillor Rutherford's comment around clarity is kindness, because I very much envision a situation where there can be some messiness, and we probably need to be a little more thoughtful in that. I'm thinking about in the next sort of week and a half, I have 3 events that I feel would be treated very differently within the ward, one of which is the Francophone school opening within the ward I represent, but that school attracts folks from across the city, and I think would be very justified to have folks from across the city. Any councillor who is invited, if they invited all councillors, I think all should absolutely be attending and part of that. I'm going to be attending an event that is run by Kids on Track, which serves a lot of communities and families, particularly within the West End and a few on the north side. It might be weird if somebody from a different, the complete opposite end of the city came. I mean, at the same time, that group does great work, and I want them to show it off. And so I think that would make sense if folks there, but I would certainly, I think it would make sense that if somebody else were coming to sort of, hey, have a heads up. And at the same time, there's a community meeting tonight about a specific rezoning proposal that is solely impactful to the residents that I serve. And in this case, it's within the community that actually borders Councillor Hamilton's and I. So the two of us. And so that one, I think, very much is a local only issue. And so because, there have always been these examples, and generally speaking, again, in the ward I represent, I haven't had any issues with folks stepping on each other's toes or not reaching out to one another, but being that I've seen the opposite as well, and with the introduction of parties and in the introduction of all of that, there may need to be a separate conversation. And I appreciate your caution, Mr. Rathgeber, but I think the next council may need to think about how to tackle that, just so that there isn't the messiness that can evolve from that. So I don't have any answers today. I think this is the right course of action for today, receiving for information, but I will offer that as an outgoing word of advice for whoever's here in this table next term, that they might want to think about that, because I think we need to be aware of that nuance a little bit more. So that's it. I'll go to Councillor Tang to close. Sorry? Oh yeah, confirming quorum. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the room. I can see 1 on camera. Oh, there I can see at least 2 on camera. So great. We are good for quorum. Councillor Tang?
Great, thank you very much. And I guess maybe just build on some of those pieces. I think we've had this conversation many times, and I'm not sure today generated more clarity, if less. I think especially, and I think this is actually important conversation in an election year. I can appreciate that there's more flexibility, but I find, in an election year, we have particular considerations, including, for example, how to separate between campaigning and council business, and we've been talking ad nauseum in info sessions, with council members and offices, and I still see campaign materials printed at City Hall. And so I feel like just because we have something, we talk about it, and we rely on common sense and courtesy and nicety, that is not being followed. And so I think this is a really important discussion, and a good reminder of what to do and not to do. However, I appreciate the commentary around deferring to the organizers, but time and again, I've seen organizers being put in very awkward positions where they're not really able to say no, for all kinds of reasons. And I think that's not something that I will want stuff like this to impact those communities. I also feel, I appreciate that, it feels very straightforward and very common sense, and but we are leaving it in the hands of, character and behavior of individuals, and I think not having it codified just leaves that gap super open, considering all the risks identified by my colleagues around parties, et cetera. I think, for the next council, there should be some kind of codification that I like to see. But I think for today, I'm not sure any more conversation will yield the clarity we need for this year. But for now, I think we can move forward. But I think, key pieces about kindness, courtesy, common sense is all good advice that I hope everybody follows. Thank you.
Thank you. Please vote for receipt of information.
We're just waiting for one more vote.
Whoops. Apparently I'm not doing my job.
We have all the votes.
Bad chair. Please display the vote. And that is carried. Next up, item 3.3, use of city crest / recognition certificates. Verbal report, I believe, our clerk / protocol office.
Yeah, so happy to provide some introductory remarks. I've had quite a few questions come in recently related to the coat of arms, which is more commonly known as the city crest. So there are a number of city symbols, but the most prominent one that you're all probably most familiar with is the city's crest. It currently adorns the city's flag. It's also on councilors' business cards. It's on councilors' letterheads. It's obviously on your minutes and agendas, which is when I get to use it. It's on the mayor's proclamations, council's greeting cards, as well as some workwear that you all have, as well as council and your staff name tags. It's also on council certificates of recognition. I said the word council a lot because administration does not use that. This administration has a different logo, but the coat of arms, which is here in council chambers, is dedicated predominantly for city council and its use. There are a few other symbols, such as the mayor's chain of office, which is obviously restricted to the mayor and whoever holds that position. There are some high-level guidelines that we have around who gets business cards, but again, I come back to saying is only applicable to those on the second floor. But other than providing particular instructions on when you can use city letterhead, the Office of the City Clerk does not have any guidelines beyond the creation of the crest and the high-level council protocol. It doesn't go into any further detail. Happy to take any questions. Sorry if you have any.
No, that's fine. Thank you. I wanted to make sure you were finished there. Great. We can move to questions. Councillor Chang selected it, but do you want us to kick us off?
Yeah, happy to. And so just to be clear, we're talking about the crest with the two individuals.
So it's what's on,
on the
it's
business
the
card.
official city crest. There's
Yeah.
a few other official symbols, but the crest is a representation of
Yeah.
the 13.
And I guess under, so business cards, letterheads, that kind of stuff, we all have access to. I guess proclamations, we've seen that.
Those are done on behalf, those are the mayors.
Those are mayors.
We provide those as the Office of the City Clerk, but they are at the direction of the mayor.
And the recognition certificate, stuff like that, that's...
Depends on if it's a formal recognition on behalf of all of City Council or if it's done individually by either the mayor's office or by individual councillors.
Right. So just so I'm clear, though, because I have seen this kind of out there quite a bit, is this, if I wanted to use that for my own purpose, is that allowed? Can I, get that somewhere? Is there a template? Or is this strictly through the mayor's channel for those kinds of pieces, or through the protocol office?
Yeah, so no, the answer, let me answer, there was a few questions in there. So when a councillor determines that they're going to respond in correspondence using the city crest, either electronically or in your letterhead, that is an individual decision that you and your office make. There are different templates that are available that are provided by the Office of the City Clerk, but how that is used is an individual decision. But again, if it does have the city crest on it, you are representing yourself as an elected official or an elected member of City Council. You didn't say this, but you can't use it, obviously, in case anybody chooses to run in any election. You can't ever use the crest when using campaign material, but that's a separate conversation. I don't think that's what you were asking about.
Sorry, and so just we are able to use it if we have any request.
Yeah, going back through all of our documentation, the use of the city crest, the city clerk, I'm the custodian of holding it, so obviously we provide it when we're printing your business cards after the election.
Yeah.
You get your name cards. Wherever we are adorning anything with the city crest, we do so as the official custodians on behalf of you individually, as well as the whole of council. And then we leave the use of it up to the mayor's office and individual councillors' offices, so there isn't anything that restricts the creation, I'm going to say, of a letter of acknowledgement or particularly of recognition certificates to a community group. I'm making this up.
That there's no rule to say that. So if we wanted to, at our own discretion, informally, we can.
I haven't found that council's provided any direction to the contrary, and I did look because I was recently asked.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to play this out. So, because I had not known that we could, I didn't know that that was an option, or that there's rules restricting the use. It's just kind of out there, right? I've seen, certainly MLAs do so, and MPs do so, and I understand that's there's a proper kind of process for them to submit those kinds of requests through their own processes. I was not aware of any, but it sounds like there isn't anything in place. So if I wanted to, or any of us, if we go to events, we could generate our own, recognition. And if all 12 of us show up to a community event, we could, in theory, all provide recognition.
If it's on behalf of you as an elected official, but if you are providing an acknowledgement on behalf of council, that's a different,
I do mean on behalf of individual, yeah, okay.
I can't find anything to the contrary.
Yeah, okay, that's good to know, because I wasn't sure what the practice is, but now I think, now we all know that it's something we can all be doing. Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Rice.
No question, just thanks for that clarification. It's wonderful.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wright.
Hi, thanks, Brent. I guess I mean, I've done this through the ward office, and maybe it's because of my experience working with the MLA's offices, but, I mean, because the MLAs can actually, and MPs can print their own certificates. There's no special protocol at the other levels of government. It's just something that's done by the individual elected representative, right?
Yes. May I answer that, Councillor
Sure, please.
Chairman?
Yeah.
Yes, in both MLA and in MP offices, the House of Commons or the Legislative Assembly provides blank scrolls, quite a big number of them actually on an annual basis, and then the local offices, as Councillor Wright just indicated, completes them by putting in the name of the recipient or the organization or the event that's being honored, and there are no rules as to who can and cannot get a scroll from an elected representative. That's all at the discretion of the MLA or the MP.
Okay, and they can use their official symbol, which is the mace, right?
Yeah, the federal ones, the coat of arms, federal coat of arms is on the generic scroll, and then the local MP puts on whatever they want, the name of the recipient, the organization, individual, and their own name, and usually the date. And like I say, if it's a ribbon cutting or an anniversary, that's always included.
Right. Okay. Okay. Thanks very much for clarifying.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rutherford.
Yeah, thank you for this. I guess while nothing is written, I guess to the city clerk, do you think there should be something written specifically? I'm thinking about the crest, because I'm playing out the scenario that Councillor Tang mentioned where we all come with the city crest on a certificate with our own names on it, and we don't look unified as a council. We don't look coordinated, and I think that wouldn't be a good public perception. But that being said, I have my own branding as a city councilor. I think we all do, that says, you know, Aaron Rutherford, Councilor Ward and Olnick. So if I wanted to make a certificate with my branding, that seems different than the use of the crest. Or am I overthinking it? And I guess just to Aileen.
Yeah, so appreciate the question. So one, showing up an event goes back to the previous conversation. If it, at the risk of saying this again, it really depends on the genesis of the invitation. So if an invitation comes in
Yeah,
to the
I'm not talking about the event. Okay, I'm not talking about, like, we can all attend events. Yeah. It's great. But I'm saying if we all show up with our own individual certificates for, let's say somebody's, like, I'm just gonna put something out there, like 100th birthday. Do we look coordinated as a council, or do we look disparate? Does it have the same meaning as if it comes collectively from all of council as it does from us as individuals? What if only 5 do it? Then does it reflect that? Like, I'm just trying to play out specifically with the city crest. If there's nothing in writing, should there be something in writing? It never stops any councillor from doing their own certificates with their own branding. You can't direct that of any other councillor, but I think just like we have the specific kind of set out rules for if there's an official invite to the mayor, I think if there's official request for protocol, and that's when we use the crest. If there's not an official request for protocol, then we as a council office can use that discretion with our own branding. Like, that's what I'm trying to understand, if there needs to be something that comes out of this discussion today around clarity on the use of the city crest.
So if it would be helpful to council to have rules around when the crest can be used, and I'd rather to say proclamations. I think that's crystal clear. We have a very strong process with the mayor's office. I think that works. I don't think there needs to be guidelines around using the crest either on letterhead or your electronic signature as representatives. I think that's an entitlement that you all have. If you would like some guidelines around using the crest when sending certificates of recognition, I'm just going to say community groups to say something. I'm sure we could put something in place that the onus would then be on your offices to let us know when you're using something, and your offices could go and check. I'm making this up. I'm going to an event, Victoria's going to an event, we're both bringing certificates of recognition. You're now coming, Councillor Rutherford, your team logs into the system to say, oh, Aileen's already done a happy birthday. I'm making all of this up. And so
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, then it's up to your office to determine if you want to do a third one or if we want to get together. The thing is once you start bringing representation on behalf of a larger body, you are either individually acting as an individual councillor or you're acting as a body. And when you act on the body, the representative is the chief electoral officer, which is the mayor. But again, happy to provide clarity, and I just don't want to make this too cumbersome for your office.
But what if, but this is, so you bring up a point that is exactly what I'm trying to shore up. So like playing out some of these scenarios, let's say that the mayor is attending an event, the mayor does have a certificate, or the deputy mayor is attending an event and has a certificate. And that is on behalf of council collectively, correct?
Yeah, the mayor is the chief of
So,
the elected body.
but we don't have any rules right now that would stop or be clear, rather than stop isn't the right word, be clear about other councillors also bringing their own certificates with the crest in that scenario.
I can't.
Or do we?
Yeah, I do understand this has, we might be stepping into a level of detail that I am out of my comfort zone, but I would show deference, our office would show deference to the mayor if the mayor was showing up, either one with a proclamation as determined by him or her, and or a certificate of recognition. If councillors were also going, I would have made an assumption that councillors wouldn't be bringing their own certificate of recognition because the chief electoral officer was there representing council. But I should make those assumptions and happy to create some guidelines if it would make things a bit easier as we go into an election year.
Thank you. That's all my time for now.
Thank you. I think it'd be Councillor Rice then, in terms of order. Yeah.
Yep.
Or, yeah. Well, anyway, yeah. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, I think
It's me or
incorrect.
Councillor
Well,
Tang?
I think Councillor Tang incorrectly showed for 2 rounds. I don't think she's had 2 rounds. No, I don't think she had.
Look at the name.
I mean, I don't really care that much.
Yeah,
but
I don't care. And
Go ahead.
Which
Councillor.
one? Go ahead. I think that is very. Thank you, Councillor Rutherford brought that, and I don't think that type of scenario happened since we become councillor, but for the future, and if something like this, I think this back to the early discussion for that other item with the candidates, communication, everything, also for the communication to make clear if mayor is going and no other councillors will do that, present their own certificate. But my question to City Clerk and then is about if we receive the specific request from organization and the individual, I can give example, birthday certificate and wedding anniversary party certificate, and so those they reach out to mayor and the mayor provided mayors on behalf of council, but the specific individual say, I live in this councillor's area. I would like to my own councillor's certificate. I actually experienced that one. And so they request many times. And they said, yes, it's nice. I have mayors, all councillors' name there, the certificate, but I would like to my own councillor's certificate. So what's the answer or guidance or advice you would give for this type of situation?
So right now, there isn't anything that prohibits councillors using the crest as a representative of council to provide a certificate of recognition. If that's something that would be helpful, we need to take this away, and obviously I would like to consult with the mayor's office and the mayor before we would come back, but always happy to provide some guidelines, but there isn't anything right now.
So it's a request from organization and a request from individual, and they said, okay, we would like to have that. And so right now we get clear and we can use the certificate and provide it to the community groups, culture celebrations, and individuals as well. But the situation right now is if mayor already provided, they still request what's we could do for that situation.
I'm not sure that we don't track when the mayor issues certificates, and nor do we track when councillors, so I'm not sure that I can answer that question. But if that's something that you would like tracked, the use of the crest for certificates of recognition, we need to take that away and think about that.
I don't know because I do not create the extra work for the city clerk office, and maybe something. Is there any advice from our ethic advisor regarding this type of?
Well, my advice is similar to my advice on the previous topic, attending events. In fact, they're really wrapped up in the same cloth, because the presentation of a scroll or a placard of some sort, it probably may correspond with attending an event, or it may not. It just might be sent to the recipient. Again, I think there are no rules, and I agree with the clerk. There are no rules, and I think that's probably good, because if you try to codify this stuff, it's going to be like herding cats. I don't know how to pick up on Councillor Rutherford's query. I don't know how you coordinate 3 or 4 different councillor offices in providing, coherent and similar branding with respect to the coat of arms or the crest. So I think, again, it's up to the recipient. And I mean, I've been to a lot of these events. You've been to a lot of these events. I think the Community League, or the 100th birthday party celebrant, is quite happy to receive multiple congratulatory scrolls from multiple elected representatives. So I think that should be the guiding. In the absence of formal rules, I think the guiding rules should be what does the recipient want.
Thank you. That's my question. Back to the chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tan?
Yeah, this is my second round. Yes. I think just based on that line of questioning, I think, I think some clarity would be helpful. And similar to kind of what I said earlier, we kind of leave things up for people's common sense, and that's not necessarily followed in other circumstances. I don't know how to kind of provide kind of direction that's as wide and kind of give you the space to create something that's not so onerous, but have some kind of thing written down. For example, on the use of crest that mirrors protocol for proclamation. And if there's individual requests, I don't know, like personal branding, I think it's fine for people to use. But like for me, the city crest has value for this role and for this office. And I think it's more than just attending events. I think it's something that's symbolic, that is, has its own story and history and branding. And I mean, I feel like typically a corporation will have pretty strict guidelines around branding of a logo and how one may or may not use it. And then in this case, it actually feels like there's nothing. So I feel like some kind of parameters would be helpful. So I think, I don't know what the wording would be like, but that administration provide a report that outlines some options for the guidelines around the use of city crest. I'll be also curious if other jurisdictions have any parameters like that, or is this something kind of a free-for-all?
So that motion, did we capture that motion?
Well, I'm just trying to think of
or is there some tweaks you would like?
I'm just trying to figure out priorities and the best governance tool to use, recognizing the other things that are going on this year. Is this something that committee wants guidelines quickly? If so, can draft something like we did previously for committee to just, I don't like having committee approve guidelines by motion, but I also don't think that right now is the time for us to open up the council city protocol policy. I think that's a post-election activity because we have other things going on. So if you want us to come back to the council services meeting in May with some thoughts about, what would be sort of the best, we already know what other jurisdictions do, and
oh, that's good. Okay.
I think that
conversation could be.
I'm making this up, and I'm looking at Muna, who's going to be typing as I'm talking very slowly. That administration return to the next committee meeting with some options on guidelines for use of the city crest, excluding the mayor's office, but obviously in collaboration. And then we can have another conversation at the next Council Services Committee meeting.
Okay, is that the motion you're looking to make, Councillor Tang? Okay, great. That motion is on the floor. Questions, Councillor Rice?
If that motion is on the floor, I do have the concern for the timeline, because we're getting into the election year where we will not, based on the rule, we will not use any council and the city's resources after May 31st. That means the scenario or organization will not happen until after election. And why we cannot wait for the protocol discussion and city clerk just mentioned, and after election. And otherwise you have the discussion and everyone's so busy schedule, and then you will not be applicable and for the situation, because after May 31st, that's a hard date, and we will not use any resources for that. So I don't think it's the right timing to do that for the May, but I think it's definitely it's worth to have clearly certain guidelines, and then after election.
Okay, great. Was just to confirm, were you speaking to the motion then, or was that a question?
I could confirm to speak motion. I do not have questions for that.
Okay, so yeah, we'll treat that as speaking to the motion. Just see if anyone else has any questions, just to double check. I know we sort of moved into speaking. I'm not seeing anyone else on the boards for questions, so anyone else wishing to speak to it? Councillor Rutherford?
Yeah, just listening to Councillor Rice's perspective, and I appreciate the perspective in terms of the timing. So I wanted to just speak to that. I think you're right. It doesn't affect this council or anything that we do, but I do think it's a quick, easy clarity that can be provided to the next council, so that when they start, there's already those rules in play that can be provided during orientation. And so, and then if they want to change the rules, if they want to have a further discussion about it, they can. But I think from a timing perspective, that's why I'll be supporting this motion. Recognizing that, yes, it doesn't change anything for us, but sometimes we have to look forward to providing that clarity to the future councils. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else on the board wishing to speak. Councillor Tang to close.
Yeah, I think Councillor Rutherford captured that pretty well. For me, I feel like without something in place, it is a bit of a Wild West, and there's some expectations, but again, we're relying on common sense, and so far, I'm not sure that's really playing out quite so well. I think City Crest is quite unique, it's valuable, and when we can kind of use it at our will, I think that actually devalues it. Just like any kind of corporate logo, I know there's, having worked in various settings, there are some pretty strict parameters, including down to like the shade of color, font size, font. These are pretty strict. If not, like people outside of that corporation will want to use it. Even our own City of Edmonton logo has some pretty strict parameters as well. So I guess in this case, I actually don't understand why we don't have some clear expectations set on paper. But I appreciate that, this is an election year. The clerk's office has plenty on their plate. And so I think having some commentary or kind of a straightforward report will be appreciated at this point. And then this will set up the next council for this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Please vote.
Yes. Thanks, Councillor Cartmel. Apologies for that. We have all the votes.
Thank you. Please display the vote. And that is carried. Last item of business is motions pending. Councillor Stevenson, I believe, is going to be restating her motion. So, Councillor Stevenson, would you like to restate your motion?
Yes, thank you very much. I will restate my motion as I pull it up. that administration review existing policies and processes to introduce cost guidelines for travel expenses to be covered by the common budget, with the option for councillors to supplement through their ward budget or a personal expense.
Thank you. I'll accept the motion, and if you'd like to take 2 minutes to introduce.
Thank you so much. This is just a reflection of some conversations that we've had in the past about how we manage our common resources through the common travel budget. I think we generally see, really prudent use of our tax dollars when we are traveling on city business, and traveling on city business continues to be a really important thing that we at this table do. This motion is just to provide some parameters, guidance for staff who are booking this travel often on our behalf, to ensure that we're being as responsible with that budget as possible. I do think there are instances where things need to be balanced. There may be a trade-off between proximity to a conference, where hotel costs may be a bit higher, but it saves in potentially other travel costs. So my purpose in restating is to just provide a bit more flexibility around that. The opportunity to supplement through ward or personal budgets as well is there, just recognizing that some people may wish to have their family come with them, maybe upgrade a hotel room so there's a separate bedroom for little ones. Again, I think that's very reasonable and appropriate for individual councillors to be able to do. So again, this is looking forward to just providing some guidelines that can help in the booking of that and ensuring that we all have a common understanding of what's coming out of our common budget for travel. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I see Councillor Rutherford on the board. Questions?
Yeah, I guess just a question first to the intent of the mover, or if this, around the introducing cost guidelines for travel expenses. One of the things that came up in the previous discussion that sort of iterated your notice of motion on this was that sometimes things in the common budget are not as transparent as I think I would like to see, right? So we don't have a cost breakdown. So would you envision this motion saying that a recommendation could be better breakdown of the travel expenses in the common budget, as an example? Like, is that part of your intent of this, or do we need to explicitly add that to the motion, do you think?
I think that fits very well, and forgive me, was there a related motion to the chair, if I...
No, because I think it could be captured in here, and if
Great.
that's the mover's intent, and as long as administration and council services team is aware of that intent, then we can make sure.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion and a really good addition to ensure that there is that transparency there. Is it maybe just, it's your time, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I guess maybe just a question to administration is, A, do you interpret this motion that way? And B, what is the current practice? And do you need any more guidelines on how we would like to see that more transparently captured?
I'd love to get more explicit instructions so that all of council understands. We're always happy to add more transparency to expenses.
So how does it, can you just break it down for me? Because right now it just says, it doesn't, when we present, because we put the common budget, just like our ward budgets, up publicly. What currently is public facing?
Let's just we'll start with the common budget.
Yeah, the common budget around travel. Like, will it say CUDA? Let's say I've got a CUDA. Does it say, does it break it down?
Cost. It just, if you want to break, to jump in and try to help. If you want it broken down into, I'm making this up, airfare, food, hotel, incidentals, like high level, because right now it would just say Councillor Rutherford went X. It wouldn't break those things down. But if you want us to, we can bring back amendments.
Yeah, that's kind of the transparency level I'm looking for. I'm curious. I know Councillor Knack was also pretty passionate about this when we brought this up. So I'd be curious what his thoughts are. But I don't know how to friendly amend this to be clear on like transparency of like a cost breakdown of travel expenses in the common budget. If that needs to be, or if there is a separate motion, then maybe we do that there. But that is the level of, because as I understand it, in order for the journalist to get that for the Stampede specifically, they had to put in a FOIP request. And I think that is a problematic, that they would have to put in a FOIP request to get information that I feel should be readily available to the public.
Yeah, so if, just to speak on behalf of the mover of the motion, if it's okay to just say that administration review existing policies and process to introduce cost guidelines for travel expenses to be covered from the common budget, including additional reporting requirements that include breakdowns into these 4 general categories: travel, accommodation, food, and miscellaneous, and also come back with options for councillors to supplement through their ward budgets or at personal expenses where the maximum has been exceeded.
I guess to the mover, would you consider that friendly?
Certainly, I'm wondering, as eloquent as that was, perhaps the amendment could read, introduce cost and disclosure guidelines for travel expenses. So just introduce cost and disclosure guidelines for travel expenses.
Well, that makes it sound like we don't have disclosure guidelines, and we already do.
And enhanced cost and enhanced disclosure guidelines.
I love it when we're clear, so that, because people don't have to interpret what enhanced means.
I've heard a recommendation from the city clerk's office of what a friendly amendment could look like. I'm going to double check to see if there's anyone who doesn't view that as friendly. Appreciating the other suggestion, but I'm just going to take the clerk's suggestion as our friendly amendment. Anyone not accepting that as friendly? No, we are going to accept that as friendly. Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Rutherford?
No, that's everything. Thank you, Councillor Knack.
Thank you. Councillor Rice, please go ahead.
Thank you. I think that is related to my question. I do believe we already have the cost guidance in place right now, right? We don't? Okay, so that is the intention for your motion is to introduce cost guidance. And so that be added. And also, because current travel cost and covered by the common budget. And then for this, not travel, no,
So
by word.
Sorry, Councillor Rice, just to be really clear, if you're traveling on behalf of the city, because you're a representative on a board appointed by council, then it's covered by the common budget. If you are wanting to go to I'm making this up, you want to go to a conference of an area that is interest to you, that would be covered out of your own ward budget. And yes, we do cost everything appropriately within the system, but the disclosure would just say Councillor Rice went to this conference, it cost $10. I think what this motion would be is it would break down that $10 into the required component part.
So for me, ask this type of question because I received some questions myself. I didn't go and travel other than Edmonton. So no problem for me. And that if the public needs this transparency, needs this responsibility. So to be clear, the current existing policy is if councillor go on behalf of the council business. So that is covered on the common budget. So if councillor go just interested in based on their own interest to attend a certain conference, so this motion will be cover the option for councillors to go by themselves and use their ward budget.
No, to clarify, the intent of these guidelines would be if I, setting some parameters around the type of hotel or the cost of a hotel stay per night. So right now, when our staff book, to the best of my knowledge, they don't have any guidance around which hotels to book. So I have had travel booked on my behalf that ended up being a very nice hotel, which I enjoyed and appreciated, but in the absence of any other guidelines, we may end up in a standard of accommodation that may not reflect the values of this council, our fiscal realities, and in the absence of of guidelines, that's the situation we could end up in.
So you try to make the staff job easier for booking the hotels for.
Yeah, and again, I could be mistaken, but I also don't know if there's parameters around the type of plane tickets we get. If a councillor requested business class versus economy, I think just having clear parameters around that when it's coming out of our travel budget, recognizing that if you wanted to upgrade to business, then you would be able to do that through your award budget or a personal expense.
So, okay, we don't have that type of sentence in place right now. We don't.
That's my understanding.
Okay. Then what's the personal expenses? How is this guidance and the to limited personal expenses? How? Yeah, I don't know why personal expenses to be included. If they want to spend their own money to get the nicer hotel, what is? I'm a little bit confused. The personal expenses piece here.
So the idea would be there would be a base allowance that could be paid for out of the common budget. But that if someone, so for example, when I was booking travel for FCM in Calgary, I had been booked as a single hotel room. I asked how much would it cost to upgrade to a suite so I could have my daughter come with me, and it was $1,500 a night. I don't believe there was any policy that would have prevented me from saying, yes, please book that room, and that would come out of the common budget. But I think if a standard hotel room was X and I wanted to upgrade, spend that X out of the common budget, but then upgrade out of my personal budget, I think that would be entirely appropriate.
But you don't need guidance for how much money you spend on your personal expenses.
Absolutely not.
And you only need guidance and then how much you can spend and from common budget or your words budget.
That's correct. That's the wording of the motion.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. There's no other questions. Anyone wishing to speak to it? Not seeing anyone. Click on Councillor Stevenson to close.
No, appreciate the conversation. I hope this work can help provide greater clarity. Really appreciate Councillor Rutherford adding that additional piece around transparency. I think that really strengthens this work. Thank you.
Thank you. Please vote.
We have all the votes.
Thank you. Please display the vote. That is carried. There are no other items on the agenda, so we are adjourned at 11:52 a.m. Thanks, everyone.